The journey had been long, but the moment had finally arrived. Landon, the modern monarch of Baymard, felt the weight of destiny as his fleet closed in on the shores of Armenia. Across the decks, his forces were ready. This was the beginning of an unstoppable push to reclaim the Soma Empire. Landon stood before the gathered leaders, his face calm but focused. With the flick of a switch, a high-tech projection illuminated the room, leaving the local Armenian allies speechless at the sight of such sophisticated technology. He laid out the strategy clearly. The main force would strike Rivera coastal city while scouting teams would fan out across the coast. Strict engagement rules were set. No one was to act without orders unless lives were at stake. Lucius addressed the final plans as the fleet navigated the boundary waters. The sudden, suffocating heat wave was a warning from Mother Nature herself, a signal that the dreaded second dry season was fast approaching. Far from the shores of Soma, in the Yadin Empire, the death watch for King Father MacLean had concluded. The air was heavy with gloom and the constant splatter of rain as the funeral raft was set ablaze. Sirius watched his father's funeral raft fade into the darkness. Beside him, figures like Queen Ivy and the remnants of the court stood in fake mourning, their eyes harboring hidden daggers for the throne. Ivy masked her wicked delight with a solemn veil. She had spent a lifetime weeding out rivals, and now, with the king dead, she and her allies felt the board was finally set for their ultimate conquest. Back in the war zone, the countdown had begun. It was time. The fleet prepared to break apart, their goal absolute, to dismantle the Adonis intruders hidden within the Soma Empire. Artemis looked at Landon, his voice trembling with emotion. He thanked his brother for the help, realizing that without Baymard's strength, he would never have stood a chance at reclaiming his home. Beneath the waves, the secret infiltration had begun. A swarm of silent, modern submarines glided through the depths, undetected by the Adonis patrols moving on the surface above. Lucius and his team monitored the radar, moving with the precision of ghosts. They passed directly beneath the enemy patrol vessels, waiting for the signal to strike. High in the trees, the Adonis scouts bragged of their conquest, unaware that every word was being picked up by Baymard's high-tech directional microphones. Their time was ticking away. Lucius breached the surface, his movements as fluid and silent as a crocodile. It was time for the ground team to make their move and secure the beachhead before the sun could rise. The infiltration was ruthless. One by one, the Adonis scouts were silenced before they could even think to raise an alarm. The beachhead was secured, and the Baymardians prepared to advance into the heart of the territory. On the water, the patrol ships were boarded in seconds. Avril and her squad moved with deadly efficiency, incapacitating the guards before they could reach their massive signal torches. The main force was unleashed. Heavy military trucks and tanks rolled out from the ships and into the dense Armenia forests, their engines humming with restrained power. Back at the central estate, Cardinal Yu watched the horizon with growing unease. His scouts were returning, their faces white with terror, bearing news of iron monsters that defied all known logic. Battleford Ezekiel, the man known as the Punisher, felt his world crumbling. He ordered his men to reinforce the walls and prepare the ballistas, refusing to believe that any iron beast could stand against Adonis. The walls didn't stand a chance. A thunderous explosion tore through the stone, sending screams echoing across the courtyard as soldiers were thrown into the air, their defenses shattered by the Baymardian advance. Ezekiel, having survived by the skin of his teeth, dragged his broken body through the debris. The invincibility he once felt had been shattered. He knew now that they weren't fighting humans, they were fighting nightmares. The gates were blown apart. There was no holding back the tide. The Baymardian steel poured into the estate, their armored vehicles turning the once mighty training grounds into a killing field. Panic spread through the city. The Adonis followers, who had ruled with an iron fist, found themselves trapped in a circular trap from which there was no escape. Payne saw the ruin of his father's palace, the site of a horrific public execution that had scarred his soul. The pain of the past fueled his hunger for justice, and he prepared to exact it with cold blood. Even the elements turned against them. A fierce heat tornado formed, chasing Landon's vehicle through the narrow clay streets. With nerves of steel, he drifted through the turns, a man in his element despite the deadly chaos. Anchored by high-tech latches, they weathered the storm. Inside the shaking frame, the air grew hotter, but the mission continued unabated. This was only the beginning of their final strike. The palace gates loomed ahead. The iron monsters had arrived, and the final battle for the heart of the empire was about to be decided in the unforgiving glare of the morning sun.